Viewers, welcome to another episode of The Legends. Today we are in Westlands, Nairobi, at the home of the Njoroges, where we meet the first woman to be ordained as a minister of the Presbyterian Church of East Africa, the Reverend Dr. Nyambura Njoroge. Welcome to the program, Dr. Nyambura. Please introduce yourself to the viewers and let us know who is Dr. Nyambura Njoroge.
Nyambura is the daughter of Muthoni and Githaje. I was born in Geda and lived there for the first 16 years of my life, because that's where I started school, primary school, and then walked over the fence and went to high school. And after completing the high school, that's when I ventured into Nairobi City at Kenya Science Teachers College to train as an S1 teacher. So that's part of my growing up. I'm the last born of 9 daughters of Muthoni, a midwife, professional midwife, and Githaje, who was a teacher and Presbyterian clergy.
As a daughter of a Presbyterian minister, what really prompted you? I know it's the call, but what really drove you to the ordained ministry as a pathfinder?
As a child, I always wanted to be a teacher. Okay. And at a given point, I was very specific. I wanted to be a high school teacher. Probably because of being a last born, I didn't feel like I knew how to deal with the little ones. But around the age of 10, 11, I remember a conversation with my father asking me, what do I want to become? And I said, Dad, of course, I want to be a teacher. But if the church opened the doors for women to be ordained ministers, I would like to be one. And of course, I went on with the life. I went to college, as I have said. I graduated, started teaching. And my second year of teaching, my first year of teaching in 1976, I discovered the church had opened the doors. Okay. I think I was among the first to know, in the sense that my father was still very much active in the church, even though he had already been retired. Okay. So when the General Assembly passed the vote to train and ordain women, then I welcomed the idea, but I didn't know that within a year I would be literally going to the elders in my local congregation at Geda to say that I have a call to the ministry and to seek for their guidance. Okay. Of course, before I did that, I had already informed my parents and my siblings, and I had their support. So that's how it started. But I should also say that growing up in the months, even though most of my adult life, my father was already retired. Those were the days when even though you are retired, you would be recalled. And I remember that my father was recalled in the early 70s to accompany the theological student by the name of Nehemi Kehara. So I was familiar with what was going on, even when he was retired. But I think now looking back, my call to the ministry probably was more nurtured by my mother's life and professional life. My mother was a trained midwife from Tomotomo, where she grew up. And she believed that being a midwife was a calling. She used to say, this is my vocation. And because she practiced midwifery from home, all of us kind of were involved in one way or another. When women came to her clinic, if she was not there, we welcomed them. She had trained us how to deal with them, particularly if they were in labor, if she's completely absent, what we should do. So that kind of involvement, and her being a church elder, one of the pioneer women to be ordained elders in 1960s, and having been a guild leader for most of my adult life, I now see a lot of me and my ministry in the way she carried her faith and how she practiced her faith. Not that my father didn't have an impact, but I think that's how now, as I rewind the tape, my mother's faith, vocation, and leadership in her own right, a church leader in her own right, continues to impact my calling and my ongoing ministry.
Okay.
She was very outspoken about things. So very early I discovered the injustices that women face in society, in families. Some of the women who had difficulties delivering, she would finally help us to understand that sometimes it's because they were malnourished.
Okay.
And so those kind of dynamics, but one image which stayed with me and which made me discover that I have really to understand the social issues and the social construction and the social occasion of people was our neighbor who came, she delivered, and then after 3 days she left. And then within 2 weeks, I met her on the way, carrying the baby with a jar of water on her back and a load of firewood, coming from her shamba to her home, which was very near our home. And I couldn't help but ask my mother, how could it be that she just delivered and now she is back into the normal duties of drawing water, looking for firewood. So those were kind of childhood conversations I had with my mother. And somehow it stuck with me. How she cared about the struggles of women. And the other one is, of course, she always invited us to join her in prayers whenever there was a woman in labor, whether it was a difficult one or not. If it was difficult, she would come and ask us to actually pray with her so that she could make the decisions that were needed, particularly summoning the family to bring the vehicle. There were no ambulances then, so that the woman could be taken to the district hospital where there could be a cesarean section and all that. So those kind of experiences as a child, I believe impacted my calling and what became my passion, issues of social justice. So that's part of that background. But I also, back again to my mother, she narrated a lot about her growing up in Tomotomo, how she became a Christian, having been born in a home of a single mother, and how she found her way to Christianity, which was nurtured by her uncle, the Reverend Pokahuho. So again, there was that element of church and her faith and that kind of upbringing at Motomo. And she is the one who introduced me to Kiamakeago, which eventually became the Women's Guild. So that narrative has stayed with me.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow, I can see the foundational work that your mom did to you prior to be joining the ordained ministry. Now let's go back to something that you said. when you eventually realized that the General Assembly has passed that they can admit women into the ministry, you went to the elders. Can you tell us, are there some obstacles that you experienced? Now, I'm trying to imagine the shock that the elders may have had now to think about a woman getting into the ministry, and they had never experienced something like that.
It intrigues me how the elders of the day at PCA Geda received the news. Obviously, they knew me from childhood. My mother being who she was, my father being who he was, they were part of the team of elders I went to. And I don't remember any kind of surprise.
Okay.
And I got support from there. So I never, both at home and at the congregational level, I never faced any challenges. They welcomed the idea. When my mother was ordained an elder, in June 1967, there were 7 of them, 5 were women.
Okay.
So I think also with that background of having 5 women elders from the early days of the 60s, probably played the role into the elders welcoming my announcement of the call to the ministry.
So did you experience challenges in the interviewing process, the subsequent processes, Presbyterian and national interviews?
When I approached the parish, again, all the clergy who came to the Modidi parish of the day, they worked very closely with my father. By the way, my father only worked in Modidi parish because he was ordained during the emergency time in the 50s. So we knew them. We knew the ministers, as children. So when I went to Reverend Samuel Deuri, again to get to that level of the parish, again, there was no obstacle. I don't remember how he reacted, but again, there was no obstacle because I went through all the steps up to the training. And that's when I met our colleague, Timothy Joya. And he was the secretary of the training committee. He was the secretary of the training. I went to his home. And he welcomed me in his home, and we started just having a conversation before the interview. And so, if there were backstories of people who questioned, I'm yet to discover them. And some of them I have heard of them. But I don't recall any direct opposition to my announcement that I have come to seek the path to go to St. Paul's. Yes. And
prior to proceeding for your graduate studies or further studies, how many parishes after you graduated from St. Paul's did you serve?
I left St. Paul's we graduated July of 1980. In August of 1980, I posted to Bahati Parish.
Bahati, Nairobi now?
Yeah, in Nairobi. And that's where I was until end of 1985. Already by that time I had taken study leave for my master's and went to Louisville Seminary in Kentucky.
No, when you were posted to Bahati in 1980, so there was some time before you ordained. You ordained in
80. I was sent there as a student. And I was ordained exactly 2 years after my reporting to Bahati. Was
it normal then to stay for 2 years before ordination, or is it just?
Yeah, it's a good question because I had to reflect on that now when I discover sometimes theological students in parishes don't take 2 years.
It's supposed to be 6 months.
But I reported at Bahati when Njoroge was on study leave in Netherlands.
Which Njoroge?
Njoroge is my husband.
Oh, your husband. No, I thought you were talking about a minister.
No,
Okay,
so I went there, and of course, you knowing what you know about our church, if you are married, your spouse is also taken very seriously. And of course, in my case, it was also very important that he was present, and personally, I would not have wanted to go through the process in his absence. So the first year at Bahati, the discussion did not even come up, because they had not even met Njoroge at Bahati. So when he came back the following year, in 1981, in May, then after that is when now the discussions started in the presbytery. So towards the end of the year, the process of interviewing me for licensing now began in late 1981. And then my licensing, of course, then took place in January of 1982. I would also say probably why I wasn't ordained soon after the licensing is because after my licensing, I went straight for maternity leave. Which meant then I had another 2 months when I was not in the parish. So then the preparation for ordination discussions, of course, I was not responsible for the discussions, the presbytery was. So then September came. And so I would say if there was any delay, it was because for a whole year, nobody could have thought of discussing my licensing and ordination.
So you were ordained and remained in Bahati? I
remained in Bahati, and then I got the opportunity to go and study, 84, 85. I came back to Bahati, and towards the end of 85 is when I was, by that time the presbytery had been, there were subdivisions in the parish, there were subdivisions at the presbytery level. So then I was sent to what became the Gong Hills then, to Kagemi, which was an Edeni area from St. Andrews, and it was becoming a deacon court, Kagemi and Roresho. So then I was sent to Kagemi and Roresho to prepare the deacon court to become a parish. And by August 1986, when I left for Princeton, the Roresho parish was inaugurated. And then I left. And whatever happened after that.
So you went to Princeton in 1986?
Yes.
For your doctoral studies?
Yes.
After Princeton?
After Princeton, I would simply say that God had an idea that I should go for ecumenical ministry. So
you went to WCC soon after the World Council of Churches?
No, I didn't go to World Council of Churches. I completed my PhD in January 1992. And I stayed on to wait for my graduation in June. Because, of course, we had 2 children who are in school. Njoroge was in school, so I was just waiting for them also to finish their academic year, and then come back home, as I had agreed with my church. Then between February and April, things changed. I received a letter from the World Alliance of Reformed Churches in Geneva that somebody had suggested my name to be interviewed, or in other words, to invite me to apply to work with the World Alliance of Reformed Churches. So I sat down and I said, what's this? What's World Alliance? I had not heard of World Alliance. As a good student, I went to the library and I those days the Google was not available. So I went to the library, searched with the books, searched with the records. I discovered some of the presidents of Princeton who are actually president of the World Alliance. The current president then was actually a professor of Princeton. I knew her, she never taught me. So I just made myself available to her and said, can you tell me what this is about? I understand you are the president. There is this invitation that I apply. What does this mean? And then I spoke with my family. Of course, the children were still in the picture there, but we didn't have a conversation with them. It was Njoroge and I. And we agreed applying for a job is not getting a job. It's an experience. So that's how, and the rest is her story.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Now, so you started with WARC and then you went to WCC. At what point did you go to WCC?
I was with the World Alliance for 6.5 years. So February of 1999, I left the World Alliance, which was the same corridor, the same building in the World Council. And I moved. I have always had a passion for theological education. So when the opening was there, then I applied again, and I applied and I got the position.
And now you've retired.
And so I did that job for 8 years. And then by that time, the World Alliance, the World Council of Churches had a very advanced program on HIV and AIDS in Africa. And I felt that churches needed the theological aspect of the whole campaign. So I changed from coordinating ecumenical theological education for the World Council of Churches, and I started to coordinate the ecumenical HIV and AIDS initiatives in Africa, which was now concentrating on Africa, which I really liked, because I felt that Africa needed also to have that aspect of my contribution ecumenically. Yes. So, and then I retired from that job December of 2021.
Okay.
Yes.
So now, Nyambura, I call you Nyambura because that's what you want to be called.
Thank you very much. Yes.
How does it feel to be a pathfinder, the first woman to be ordained in the Presbyterian Church of East Africa?
I think some of these things, when they happen to us, we don't go into something to be the first.
Yeah, you're right.
And so when I look back, because I know I've been a first in many things since then.
Yes.
It's like part of the calling. It's like a ministry in itself to be a pioneer. It's not something you go for because you want to be the first. You just find yourself there. And then you have to do what you have to do. And that's how I have found myself to deal with it. One of the things that happened when I was at Bahati, when I really woke up to the fact that I didn't have role models. But even before I went to Bahati, I have to tell the story of being at St. Paul's in 1978 and receiving a letter through the Women's Guild National Coordinator, Mrs. Priscilla Mireka, that there is a consultation of young women theologians being sponsored by the World Council of Churches in Geneva. And somehow my name had been discovered, that I had started theological studies at St. Paul's as the first woman in Kenya. But again, through my mother. Because the woman who discovered, who gave the name of my mother to the people in the World Council of Churches was the late Wajiko Shioli, who was very involved in the World YWCA, and she happened to be in Geneva, and the woman who was responsible for the women's desk at the World Council, they had a conversation and said, we are looking for young women theologians in Africa to come for this consultation, because she was from South Africa. We really don't know them, because that was 78. And then Wajiko said, I know a woman in Kenya who is very involved in the YWCA, and her daughter has gone to St. Paul's to study. So Wajiko didn't know me, she didn't know half my name. So they came to Mrs. Mereka and said, who is this Presbyterian woman who is involved in the YWCA and also happens to have a daughter who has gone to St. Paul's? And so through my mother, my name was given, and Mrs. Mereka, of course, knew who I was, and she came to St. Paul's to bring me the letter.
Okay.
So July of 1978, I attended this one-week consultation with the World Council of Churches and met almost 60 women, and quite a number of them were ordained. Two African women were already ordained, one from South Africa and one from Democratic Republic of Congo, Zaire, those days. And all of a sudden, I stopped feeling like I was the only one in the ocean.
Okay.
And so I then started looking for my role models through that kind of network.
Okay.
And the network expanded. But when I also came back, I said, the women elders in PCA, the guild leaders in PCA may not have been ordained,
yes,
but they have provided fundamental ministry in the church and in the shaping of the Presbyterian Church in Kenya. Again, from my mother's retelling of the story. And somehow I began to identify them as my role models,
yes,
because they had done so much work. But by that time I had already known, when I went to, by the time I got to Bahati, that without the Women's Guild leadership and the fundamental leadership of the pioneer women elders, we would not have had a vote at the General Assembly,
yes,
because they had already demonstrated that women are called. And actually, when I interviewed some of those women, they said, we knew the women in the Bible who did so much, some of them without names, others who are very well named, and we didn't see why women cannot be in the full ministry of the ordained ministry of the church. So I also had that story from the women themselves. People like Dr. Eda Gashukia and you know, the guild of the day. So I felt at home, knowing that I could be the first to be ordained as a minister, but I have a line of women from all the days of the Bible,
yes,
to look up to.
Okay.
So I have not felt, on the practical level, yes, I have been a pioneer. But when I dig into her story in the church, I don't feel alone. And that's when last year, when the 40 years was celebrated, when we did our profiles, we said we are not alone.
Yes. Because
I have never felt alone. Yes.
Now, and that's another story. Last year, I managed to attend the 40th anniversary of women ordination. And in essence, actually, it was your anniversary, not women ordination, because the others have been ordained after you. So you were literally celebrating 40 years after Reverend Dr. Nyambura Njoroge's ordination in 1982. And as at that time, I heard from the profiles that we have had over 100 women in ministry after that. Isn't that a real move?
It is, but I have been going back to those profiles Of course, some women did not give their personal profiles,
Okay.
but the list is all there of those who have been ordained and even those who have passed on. And I thank God that we have come that far. But then when you break that down to 40 years, then you discover the average number of ordained women each year has been about 3.
Each year.
Each year.
Okay.
So then you feel something is missing. But the fact that I have not been in the context, and now it's my time to discover these 40 years, what has been the openings and the obstacles for women to be in ministry.
Okay.
So at this point, I can't speculate why.
Okay.
I can only say that as a lifetime student, I'm digging into discovering what exactly has been happening the last 40 years.
Welcome back again, Daktari. Now, I want us to go back to that issue of 40 years since your ordination. And we have had about 100 ordained women in the PCA. There are still some other denominations that are yet to accept the ordination of women, especially in Africa. So do you think 100 out of, I think, 500 today is a good number, or you still need more?
Well, demographically speaking, in the churches,
Yes.
as long as I have been in the church,
Women are the majority.
women are the majority.
Yes.
Very active. If you look at the work women do in Sunday school as teachers, the mentorship of young people, the Women's Guild, those who have been now elders in some places, I understand now there are more women elders than the men. Then I don't see why the number should not increase. And that's why I have said, had I been doing my ministry here, I may have discovered what are some of the reasons that either women don't come forward or they come forward but they don't go very far. So now that I have my hands freer, that's part of my research that I'm trying to begin to shape, to look at her story before 1976 and after. I wanted to do the two before the vote, what happened, and then after the vote. It took 2 years to get, after the vote, to get somebody to begin to study. Were there others? I still have to discover. And if they were there, then what happened? Why is it that at the beginning we were just one coming through, not a critical mass? As probably you speculate that we should have probably been more through your question. So at the moment, let me say this is a topic of research for me. Yeah.
But there are definitely some apparent obstacles, right? Now the patriarchal system that we practice here in Africa.
Certainly patriarchy in the church in general, but also culturally in our various ethnic backgrounds that we come from, patriarchy plays a big role. It's a strong system. There are those who still feel not ready to accept women ministers. And here I'm not talking of men, both women and men.
Yes, I know.
Patriarchy is not about men. It's a system, of course, which lifts up the men as the authority and all that. But we women participate, and several times I catch myself when I think I'm dismantling patriarchy, I find myself, I'm actually lifting it up.
Yes.
So I can't point fingers. It's something that needs to be continuously engaged to see what are some of those patriarchal issues. And if you asked me, those are some of the things that I have faced as a minister. And one of it from the beginning was those who surrounded me, all men in the ministry, kind of wanted me to shape ministry in the image of the man. And within a very short time, I discovered I had to be myself, that I didn't have to do ministry the way my father did it. I didn't have to do ministry the way Reverend Wayaki, who was then in charge of Bahati, and the other clergy in the presbytery. I had to be myself, and I had to navigate the patriarchy both socially, culturally, and also in the church. And to be myself and to feel fulfilled in ministry, I had to address some of the things I referred to at the beginning, which I had learned from my mother and her contemporaries. Because as I say, at Geda, we had those women leaders, either as elders, deacons, and in the Women's Guild. They shaped my faith. Back home, I grew up in a home of women. I must say powerful women in their own right. And that also influenced me and has helped me to continuously unpack the social structures that we navigate as individuals, but also professionally. So I think patriarchy is something that I discover we have not dented much of it, and probably that explains a lot why our numbers are still very low
comparatively.
Yes.
Does it concern you that 40 years plus after the ordination of women was accepted by the General Assembly, we are yet to have a woman official of the GA?
Of course it does. And when I gave the keynote speech last year at the Presbyterian University, which I later published in remembrance of her, I raised that issue. That because of all those dynamics, despite having very able women, I know some of them, I don't know all of them, but as now I'm having more time to discover who is who, I know that they are dynamic women who could even probably perform better than our contemporary men in those leadership positions. Several of them have held positions as moderators of the presbyteries, clerks. There is now the regional setting, which wasn't there during my days. Again, at that level, they have also held responsible positions as leaders. We have had dynamic women leaders through the Women's Guild, who are now clergy. They have demonstrated leadership in those spaces. So I truthfully don't know why we don't have any at least within the three positions. I don't know what one needs to be a treasurer, whether you need to have the financial background, but I can't doubt that out of the 100 of us, we don't have any women who have the financial background professionally, who could also contribute as the treasurer to make the four officials as they are today. So I don't actually understand why we don't even have at the position of moderator. But I also had Probably, and it's the fact that you have lived in the US and worked there. I also don't understand why all the three positions have to be clergy.
Okay.
I believe that the position of the deputy and even the secretary general could as well be opened up for an ordained elder who has professional qualifications in administration to run those positions. And those then expand the opportunities also for women, because we also have very capable women elders in PCA among the women. So those are some of the dynamics that, and so I have seen it practiced at least in the US, where you have had women elders even holding the position of the moderator of the church. Yeah. So for me, I come with that openness that ordained elders can also bring that professional gift to the leadership of the church. Yes.
And from where you are and experience in the outside world, you realize that we have over-concentrated a lot of responsibilities to the top officials of the General Assembly, which can maybe delegated to other offices, so that the current officials of the General Assembly do a lot of work, and they're always running up and down. So when you say about ordained elders who have administrative trainings or foundations, maybe even spreading the office. The other day I said we can spread the office we need to spread the office of the Secretary General into the Principal Clerk and the Executive Clerk, because it had been done sometimes before. Or there was also another proposal of having maybe about 4 DSGs I heard from the GSC. I don't know how it went. Have 4 DSGs sharing the responsibilities. And well,
I believe, you know, in our language we say kwalia ni kwedana, but it is also goes deeper into that, in the sense of being in dialogue on the issues. I am one person who believes in identifying what the problems could be, what the obstacles and challenges are, and then we set ourselves to look for solutions. Because God has gifted us with abilities, capacities to do different things. And some of us are very good at sitting down and leading others into seeing what are the other options. And also the biblical scholars that we have to help us to see that we are not going outside what the church means and how to organize that church. The aspect of concentrating, centralizing leadership is a great disservice to the Church of Christ anywhere. I want to go back to what I said about my childhood. I believe in homegrown leadership that is at all levels. So we have strong leadership at the congregations. That's why they function the way they do. And some of those people have the capacity to be at any other level in the leadership of the church. But I would also say we need to take into account the demographics of the country. Between the 0 to 35 years of age, we are told we are 75%. That means if you take the population of people who are over 18 to 35, there's a whole chunk. And we have a lot of young people who have the potential, if not the experience, to do great work in the church and even in the leadership. I want to remind the audience that when I walked into that vestry in my local congregation, I was only 20. By the time I finished the process of interviewing and entering St. Paul's, I was 21. And by the time I finished all the process of being ordained, first of all, as an elder at the age of 23, and then being ordained as minister at the age of 25. We have a lot of young people. I had the potential, and we have had a lot of others in their 20s with great potentials that well nurtured, mentored, they can provide fantastic leadership at different levels of the church, even before they ordained elders. You know, sometimes I think we restrict ourselves too much to the ordained.
Yes.
There are people who will never be ordained, even elders, but that shouldn't stop them from providing very good leadership. And I still remember when I was interviewed, my first interview after St. Paul's, and I was asked about women clergy, because of course there was the vision that we will increase, whether they should take over the leadership of the Women's Guild. And I said categorically no. The Women's Guild was started by lay women, young women in the 1920s. That is, even before the church started giving us opportunity to be deacons in the 1940s. So why should we, just because now I'm ordained, I'm the one who is most qualified to lead this huge, dynamic movement in the church, without which the PCA would not be what it is.
Oh, yes.
So I'm one of those people who say, let's not hang up to this small space called the ordained elder, the ordained minister.
Oh, yes.
Let's see what God has given us, the gifts, the talents, and how we advance.
Okay.
Because our baptism is what really we should focus more when we talk of ministry, because that's where our ministry begins.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Let me go back to a question that is at the back of my mind and maybe the back of some of the viewers. At the 40th anniversary celebrations at Dogoto, I was there. The minister whose timeline of ordination we were celebrating was not there, Reverend Dr. Nyambura Njoroge. I know it's a personal question.
Some answers need good context.
Yes.
And maybe in an interview like this, I don't have the opportunity.
Okay.
So I was very conflicted.
Okay.
That whole week of the celebration, the official celebrations. And I was also in grief because as we prepared to come home for the celebrations, my brother-in-law, who was clergy, who was my teacher at high school, the late Daniel Murithi Mwema, was in ICU when we landed. And the first thing we did was to go and see him, and that was the last time we had with him. So he died on the Tuesday before the first Sunday when we went to Bahati. So within the week, I had to deal with the grief. I had to go to Nyeri to be with my sister, and then come to be at Bahati. And when I just saw the clergy in their black gowns, and my brother-in-law was not there to witness, that broke my heart. And so for me, my celebration was taken away by grief. But I had a request. I had watched from a distance the 100 years of celebration of the Women's Guild. Again, it was in May, 2 Sundays, and there was not a woman preaching. And I was devastated. So when I came and discovered that the leadership had decided a woman can't preach
Even at the celebration.
in another celebration, which is actually celebrating not just ordination, but the licensing of women to preach, because that's what I was taught by Reverend Wajau when he officiated my licensing. He told the congregation, licensing means now we have given her the license to preach. And I come and I discover but that at Bahati and Dogoto, and I tried to talk to those who are responsible, because I felt there was a protocol and I didn't go anywhere. And I found some of the women clergy whom I was talking to felt, yeah, it's okay. It's not a big deal.
Yes.
So I felt I was in another world, and I allowed myself to step aside and grieve. Grieve my brother-in-law, but also grieve the absence of the opportunity for women to celebrate preaching during the 40th anniversary. And at the same time, I also realized there was nowhere in the picture that there would have been a Holy Communion celebrated by the same women. So I decided it's better to keep my peace rather than be in public and not be in my best. So if you really asked me, I thank God, and you can see I'm grateful that the church celebrated the 40 years. But I'm yet to celebrate my own anniversary because I had to postpone it. To allow myself to come to a moment when I can celebrate. I'm not yet there.
Well, I understand your point of view, and it's quite varied. It's quite varied.
But I thought I spare this part of the narrative, but since you asked.
Well, it's important that we get to know what is in you and what has been going on, because we learn from the mistakes that we do. Probably for tomorrow and the future, we may have to adjust to accommodate the views of others. Now that you're retired, and you have talked about part of the mission you want to undertake in your retirement, could mentorship to young women ministers be part of your mission?
I must say it has been part of my ministry, in my ecumenical ministry. I refer you back to 78 when I had the opportunity to meet other women. And from the outcome of that meeting is that after 10 years, in Africa we created a network of women theologians, not necessarily ordained. Some of them are not even in churches that ordain women. It's actually interfaith of the Circle of Concerned African Women Theologians. And in that space, one of the fundamental things we have done for the last 30 plus years, because we got together and launched in 1989, is mentorship. So through St. Paul's Theological College and now St. Paul's University, together with other women, we have been able to mentor women, but also men, into theological education. My argument has been ordination is important. It has its role. But the fundamental thing is that women have opportunity to study theology, prepare for ministry, ordination or no ordination. Because when you have the knowledge, you can apply it in different sectors of society. And many women have not gone for ordination, either because their churches make it very difficult, or because they don't feel called for ordination, but they have the education, the theological education in different fields. So that in that space, and some of the PCA, women clergy, I see them in our network of the Circle of Concerned African Women Theologians. So that's where I have felt my calling for mentorship.
Okay.
Mentorship is not one-way traffic. People have to allow themselves to be mentees.
To be mentored, yes.
So, but that's where I continue, and beyond Kenya, I have had that opportunity to do that at the continental level. So I consider that as part of my calling. Okay. Yes, if there is a structure within PCA where that can be done, I have no problem with being involved.
The reason why I'm asking that question is that I am aware of some ordained women that are going through various challenges in the ministry, and though the PCA has the moderator for our ministers, spiritual nurture and pastoral care, some may feel even more comfortable identifying with you than
my door is 24/7 open.
Don't have an office, maybe give them your contact.
They do have it, because
they do have it.
They do have it. The clergy in PC have my contact, because I'm on WhatsApp group of clergy. Okay. Both the women and the whole club of ministers.
That statement that your door is open is very important. You need to hear that.
My door has always been open, even and these days with all the gifts of technology, you don't have to be physically present.
Yeah, you're right.
You can be any part of the world, and you can still be, and you know, it was tragic that we had COVID.
Yes.
But COVID gave us
positive development.
We could have done this interview virtually.
Yes.
So I don't have to be present.
Yes.
To be present. Yes.
Yeah, that is very important for many of our viewers who would want to reach out to you. I know they have your contact because you're in the WhatsApp group. So viewers, we want to thank Dr. Nyambura Njoroge for her time. Thank you for creating time for us to share this interview and your experience, and then knowing the journey into the ministry and within the ministry, and so many fasts that you've been able to acquire. We want to congratulate you, even as we thank you for opening up your home for us. God bless you for sparing time for us, and continue to do the work of God.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, viewers. See you in the next episode of The Legends. God bless you.